Okay, so let's jump into this whole U.S.-Ukraine thing. It's back in the news again, and this time it's not looking so good.
Definitely a lot of tension.
Yeah, we've got a ton of articles here about this growing rift between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy. Every time you think things are calming down,
Yeah.
boom, another curveball. Right.
Got a very volatile situation.
Yeah.
I think what's particularly interesting this time is just how public these disagreements are.
Right. Yeah.
This isn't some quiet diplomatic spat behind closed doors. It's on the world stage, social media, international interviews.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what the strategy is, especially on Trump's side. It seems like it all blew up after that interview where Zelenskyy said the end of the war was very, very far away.
Right.
I mean, a pretty reasonable statement given everything that's happening.
I think so.
But Trump goes on social media and just slams Zelenskyy for it.
Yeah, that very, very far away comment seemed to really strike a nerve. Trump's reaction was so swift and harsh, claiming Zelenskyy wasn't interested in peace and, implying that the U.S. is running out of patience.
Right.
But here's the thing. It's fascinating. Some analysts think Zelenskyy knew exactly what he was doing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're suggesting he's playing a calculated game, intentionally provoking Trump
Wow.
to get more leverage in future talks.
So basically, Zelenskyy is calling Trump's bluff.
Possibly.
That's a risky move, though. And then things get even more heated with that reported blow-up at the White House. We've got accounts of this tense Oval Office meeting where Trump just cuts things short.
Yeah.
Accuses Zelenskyy of being ungrateful, even implies he's risking World War III. I mean...
It's a turning point, that Oval Office meeting.
Right.
It really raises the question, is this just about policy differences? Or is there, some real personal animosity here driving this whole dynamic?
It makes you wonder what wasn't said in those official reports, what really happened in that room.
Oh, absolutely.
And then, on top of all this tension, we have this collapse of a major minerals deal.
Yeah, this was a big deal for both sides.
Right.
For Ukraine, it was crucial economic support. It was like a symbol of continued U.S. commitment. For the U.S., access to these critical minerals in Ukraine, that's a strategic win.
Yeah.
But now it's all frozen.
Yeah.
Sources are saying that Trump is demanding a public apology from Zelenskyy for his behavior in that Oval Office meeting.
Yeah.
Before he'll sign anything.
So we're not just talking about a war here. We're talking about power plays.
Oh,
resource control.
And a whole lot of ego.
A lot of ego at play.
Things are getting complicated.
Absolutely. And European leaders are caught right in the middle. We've got reports of the UK and France stepping up their involvement, hosting summits, proposing truces, trying to reassure Ukraine. But at the same time, they're making it clear they need the U.S. at the table. They can't go it alone.
It seems like everyone is holding their breath, waiting to see what Trump does next.
Right.
I mean, there are even whispers about cutting off U.S. aid to Ukraine completely. Oh, yeah.
That's where things get really scary, right?
Yeah.
Because if the U.S. pulls out completely, what happens to Ukraine?
Exactly.
What happens to the balance of power in that whole region?
This is where I think understanding the nuances of Trump's foreign policy is crucial.
Okay.
He's championed this America First approach, and it's led to a lot of speculation. What are his real intentions?
Right.
Is he truly trying to, de-escalate this conflict?
Yeah.
Or is Ukraine a pawn in some bigger, maybe more cynical geopolitical game he's playing?
It's a tough question. And Zelensky's stuck right in the middle of it. He needs the U.S. aid to keep fighting this war.
Yeah.
But speaking so frankly seems to have really ticked Trump off.
Yeah, he's facing an impossible choice.
Yeah.
We have Trump's allies publicly stating what Zelenskyy needs to do to get back in his good graces, express regret, agree to peace talks, and sign that minerals deal. But then you have some European leaders who see all this as a trap.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They think this is a way for Trump to pressure Zelenskyy into making concessions to Russia.
So Zelenskyy is basically damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. He's trying to lead a country at war while his most powerful ally is turning on him.
It's a high-stakes situation. Potentially global consequences.
Yeah.
To really understand it, I think we have to go deeper than just these headlines.
Okay.
And dig into the complexity of U.S.-Ukraine relations. It's a history full of mistrust, shifting alliances, and this constant struggle for influence.
Let's do that. I think it's important for people to get that historical context. It's not as straightforward as it might seem.
No, it's not. This isn't just some recent spat. This is the result of decades of geopolitical maneuvering, power struggles, and broken promises.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. So to really get this current tension, we need to rewind a little bit back to the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. Ukraine declares independence with all its, vast territory and resources and strategic location, becomes like this prize
Yeah.
in this geopolitical tug of war between Russia and the West.
A prize that, unfortunately for Ukraine, both sides really wanted.
Well, yeah.
The U.S. was pushing for closer ties with the West, picturing Ukraine and NATO and the EU.
Right.
And Russia saw an independent Ukraine as a huge threat. This buffer zone they thought they had was suddenly gone.
Exactly. And that fundamental conflict of interest, it simmered for decades.
Right.
Then it finally erupted in 2014 with the Ukrainian Revolution.
Right, where the pro-Russian president was ousted.
Right. And that led to Russia annexing Crimea and then supporting separatists in the east. And that's how we got the conflict we're seeing today.
And that's when the U.S. really stepped in, started providing military and financial aid under the Obama administration. But even then, it was this delicate balance, trying to support Ukraine without directly provoking Russia. Then Trump comes in with his America First approach, and that really shook things up.
Yeah, America First basically means foreign policy is transactional. Trump has questioned the value of these long-standing alliances, and he's openly skeptical about the U.S. getting involved in conflicts overseas.
Right.
And of course, you can't forget about all the praise he's given Putin, which has fueled speculation about his true motives.
It's complicated, to say the least. Okay, so with all this history, how are other players reacting to this very public Trump-Zelenskyy feud? What about Europe? They're right in the middle of all this.
Europe's feeling the pressure for sure. They know they're limited when it comes to military and financial resources, especially compared to the U.S.
Right.
So they're trying to walk this tightrope. Keep Trump happy, but still support Ukraine.
Okay.
And it's leading to some, interesting strategies, maybe even risky ones.
Like that proposal from the UK for a coalition of the willing to provide security for Ukraine. It seems kind of familiar.
Very familiar. It's like Iraq war vibes all over again.
Right.
But the context is totally different. Back then, the U.S. was leading the charge. Now, the U.K. is proposing this, but they're saying it won't work without the U.S. So it's a gamble. They're trying to, pressure Trump into getting involved.
By basically calling his bluff.
Exactly.
It's risky, though. What if the U.S. doesn't step up? This whole coalition could fall apart, leaving Ukraine even more vulnerable.
Oh, for sure.
And it would send this message of weakness to Putin, like the West can't even get its act together.
Absolutely. And that brings us right back to the big question. What is Trump's endgame here?
Yeah.
Is he really committed to stopping Russian aggression, or is this all part of some bigger plan?
A more cynical plan.
Maybe his actions seem to be helping Putin.
How so?
Well, think about it. Trump publicly undermining Zelenskyy, threatening to cut off aid, refusing to sign the minerals deal. It all creates chaos and uncertainty. And that's exactly what Putin is good at. He thrives on weakness and division.
So he's watching this whole thing unfold and thinking, this is great.
Pretty much. And the consequences could be huge. If the U.S. pulls out, Putin might think, okay, time to escalate things. He might even try to take more Ukrainian territory. It would also send a message to other U.S. rivals, like China, that America's global power is fading.
That's a pretty bleak picture. Zelenskyy is trapped, Europe is scrambling, and the U.S. seems to be backing away. Is there any way this ends peacefully?
It's hard to say. There are a few possible scenarios, each with its own problems.
Okay, let's break it down. What's the worst-case scenario? What if Trump just abandons Ukraine completely?
The worst case is that the U.S. and Ukraine completely break up. All U.S. aid stops. No more support. Ukraine's wide open to more Russian attacks. You could even see a full-scale invasion and occupation.
That would be a disaster for everyone. Not just Ukraine. All of Eastern Europe would feel way less safe.
Yeah.
And it would embolden other authoritarian leaders around the world.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, what about the best-case scenario? Could Trump and Zelenskyy work things out?
It's possible, but they'd both have to change their approach. Zelenskyy would probably have to make some concessions, maybe agree to talk with Russia or soften his stance on that minerals deal.
Okay.
And Trump would have to cool it with the personal attacks and reassure Zelenskyy that the U.S. is still with him.
But with all the animosity, all the distrust,
It'll be tough.
doesn't seem likely, right?
It'll be tough, yeah.
Yeah.
It would take some serious diplomacy. Both sides would have to be willing to compromise. The question is, are their egos too big? Can they even work together?
It's a big ask, especially with all the political pressure they're both under.
For sure.
What about Europe? Could they take over for the U.S.?
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Europe is already more involved. They're helping Ukraine financially and diplomatically.
Right.
But to fully replace the U.S., that's a huge task.
They'd have to really ramp up their military. And that means a ton of money and a whole new mindset. A lot of European countries haven't wanted to spend much on their militaries.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of unity. Europe isn't a single country. Different countries have different goals, different ideas about how to handle this conflict.
Some want to take a hard line against Russia. Others are more focused on diplomacy and de-escalation.
Yeah. Getting all of Europe on the same page would be tough.
And we can't forget about the economic impact.
Yeah.
Europe is already dealing with an energy crisis and a struggling economy. Supporting Ukraine would be a huge financial burden.
So yeah, Europe stepping up is a possibility.
Yeah.
But it comes with a lot of complications.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainties.
A lot of uncertainties. There are no easy answers. It's a complex situation with global implications, and things are still developing.
So we're left with more questions than answers?
Yeah, pretty much.
But one thing is clear. The stakes are high. The choices made in the next few weeks, the next few months, they're going to have a ripple effect around the world.
And those choices will depend on so many things. Domestic politics, economic concerns, international alliances, and maybe most importantly, the personalities and ambitions of the leaders involved.
It's a fascinating but kind of scary look at how global power really works.
You know, it's interesting how all this plays out in the media.
Oh, yeah?
It's like everyone's watching the same movie but seeing something totally different.
Right.
We've got a few articles here about how the U.S. media specifically is covering this whole Trump-Zelenskyy thing.
Yeah. And it's all over the place.
It's a perfect example of how media bias can really shape what people think.
Right.
On the right, you've got outlets saying, Trump's being tough, but that's what's needed. You know, a strong leader standing up to a weak, ungrateful ally.
Yeah.
They really emphasize the need for peace and paint Zelenskyy as this guy who won't compromise, even reckless in how he's standing up to Trump.
And they go even further right. They downplay what Europe's saying, make it seem like they're overreacting, trying to undermine Trump's leadership on the world stage.
Exactly. It's that classic us versus them story. Really plays well with a certain audience.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting. There are some cracks starting to show, even among those typically pro-Trump outlets.
Really? That's surprising.
Yeah, we're seeing some conservative commentators who are a little uneasy about all this.
Interesting. What are they saying?
Well, they're worried that Trump's personal attacks on Zelenskyy are going to backfire, alienate a key ally and push Ukraine closer to Russia. They're also worried about U.S. credibility on the world stage. They think Trump is hurting it.
So even on the right, there's not total agreement. What about the left-leaning media? What's their take?
Well, they're way more critical of Trump, as you'd expect.
Right.
They're talking about the damage he's doing to the relationship with Ukraine. They say he's reckless, impulsive, maybe even dangerous.
Yeah.
And they're really focused on what his America First policy means in the long run. They say it weakens alliances and emboldens guys like Putin.
Right. And they're asking some tough questions about Trump's motives, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're bringing up his past business deals in Russia, his admiration for Putin, all under a microscope.
Exactly. They're implying that maybe Trump isn't really trying to create peace and stability. Maybe he has other goals, maybe even personal gain.
Wow. It's night and day the way this is being covered.
It really is.
It shows how hard it is to figure out what's really going on with the news these days.
It is. It's a reminder to be skeptical. Question everything you read and hear. Look for different perspectives. Try to get as close to the truth as you can.
That's good advice. But it's a lot of work, isn't it?
It is.
With so much information coming at you all the time, it's overwhelming to sort through it all.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah.
But it's important because at the end of the day, we, the people, we hold the power.
Right.
We choose our leaders. We shape the conversation. We decide where our countries go.
Okay.
And to make good choices, we need to be informed.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners today? How do we make sense of all this? How do we find a way forward?
I think the key is to stay engaged.
Okay.
Stay informed, stay curious, stay connected to what's happening. Don't be afraid to challenge what you think. Look for different opinions. Talk to people who disagree with you.
Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, remember that even though things seem really bad sometimes, there's always hope.
I like that.
People are resilient.
Yeah.
We can make things better.
That's a good point. It's easy to forget that with all the bad news.
It is.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been fascinating, a little scary at times, but really important to understand what's going on between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Absolutely. A lot of history and complexity there.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And remember, everyone, even though it seems overwhelming sometimes, your voice matters. Stay engaged, stay informed, and stay hopeful. We can make a difference together.